The judge rolled his eyes when she entered, but her first word made everyone stand. What happens when a woman without a lawyer stands up to the entire justice system? The judge rolled his eyes, but what she did next made the whole city rise to its feet. The courtroom was cold. Not the kind of cold you get from a blast of well-functioning air conditioning. No, this was that institutional cold, the kind that seeped into your bones, the kind that came not from the vents but from the walls, the floor, and especially from the faces of the people sitting there. Every scuffed wooden bench, every tired ceiling tile, every flicker from the overhead lights whispered the same thing. You're not here to be heard, you're here to be handled. And when she entered, woman in a gray skirt, plain white blouse, and a head wrap that barely concealed the braids pinned beneath, no one turned. No hush fell over the crowd, no respectful nods or hushed murmurs. The only person who acknowledged her at all was Judge Walter Grayson, who glanced up like someone being asked to get up from his favorite chair, rolled his eyes with an audible sigh, and muttered, "Well, let's get this circus started." A few quiet chuckles floated through the room, not loud enough to count as laughter, but enough to remind everyone where the power sat. Even the stenographer, an older woman who looked like she'd been typing monotony since the Nixon years, raised a solitary eyebrow. But she, Marissa Johnson, didn't flinch. She didn't look around for support, didn't shuffle nervously or flash a smile. She didn't need their approval. That currency was bankrupt in her world. She moved forward quietly, step by step, like a woman who had already lost enough to stop fearing loss, like someone who knew her worth, even when the room didn't. The night before, she'd made a decision that turned heads before her case even hit the docket. She fired the public defender. Folks had opinions. Reckless, they said. Crazy. Some whispered she was suicidal, trying to go pro se in a criminal case like this. But Marissa wasn't built for the system's pity, and the system certainly wasn't built to protect her. She wasn't crazy. She was prepared. She looked the judge dead in the eyes, and her voice cut through the stale air like a blade. Not loud, not angry, just sharp and deliberate. Your Honor, before we begin proceedings, I'd like the record to reflect a claim of evidence tampering. You could feel the shift, that immediate tightening in the room, like someone snapped a string. Suddenly, the chuckles stopped. Even the bailiff straightened his back. Judge Grayson arched a brow, but didn't lift his chin. His voice was drenched in the lazy confidence of a man who thought he'd seen it all and didn't believe a word of what he just heard. "And who exactly are you supposed to be?" he asked, eyes fixed on the paperwork in front of him. "You have no representation. You're not a licensed attorney." "No," she said plainly. "I'm not, but I've got something better, the truth, and documents." And she paused not for drama, but because she knew the weight of silence, the ability to read, even if I'm not wearing a suit. And just like that, the courtroom changed. The moment was thin, like the pause between inhale and exhale. But inside it, you could feel something crack. The judge's head lifted, finally, his eyes narrowing the way a dog's do when it smells something unfamiliar. "You're submitting evidence?" he asked slowly. "Yes, and it's not some fairy tale out of the prosecutor's folder. These are official records, pulled from the department's own log systems, verified in response to a records request I filed myself, after my previous lawyer decided to negotiate instead of defend." Across the room, Assistant District Attorney Carrington twitched, almost comically, like a man whose chair suddenly caught fire. His head jerked toward her with a look that said, "This one knows the rules. Worse, she knows how to read them." "Approach and submit your files," Judge Grayson instructed, now sitting up straighter. Marissa handed over a flash drive. No trembling fingers, no hesitation, just calm hands doing what needed to be done. The clerk plugged it in, and the screen flickered to life. Folders neatly named popped up, full of time-stamped video files, GPS logs, digital call records, and most importantly, internal memos. The folder names said everything. Timestamp discrepancies. Officer Rogers, GPS, August 22nd. Unit dispatch record logs. Carrington's face drained of color. The confident flush of courtroom bravado vanished, replaced by that pale pink panic only bureaucrats get when their entire case rests on a foundation of paperwork, and someone just brought receipts. "This isn't possible," he muttered. "Oh, it's possible," Marissa answered, her tone still level. "It's just only a problem if you've been lying. Officer Rogers wasn't anywhere near me when I was supposedly apprehended. GPS puts him 3 blocks away. The camera the prosecution cited, it's been offline since June. I have the repair request from the maintenance division." The judge didn't look at the screen. He looked at her, studied her. like he was trying to decide if she was a magician or a demolition crew. "Did you compile this yourself?" he finally asked. "I had 2 months, a laptop, and internet access. That's all. But I wasn't about to sit on my hands while they painted me guilty." Her voice never wavered, not because she didn't know fear, but because she had moved past the point where fear had any utility. Fear didn't protect her brother from being falsely imprisoned. Fear didn't help her mother in eviction court. Fear was the luxury of people who hadn't already been buried under silence. Carrington stood, flustered, suit slightly askew. "Your Honor, I'd like to request a recess to review the material." "No," the judge cut in. "We proceed." And that's when the courtroom really got quiet. You know that kind of silence where you can hear someone's heartbeat across the room? That happened. Even the folks in the back, who had been whispering just moments ago, folks ready to see Marissa cry or crack or crumble, now watched her like she was carrying fire. She didn't grin. No gloating. No gotcha smirk. She stood calmly, not because she'd already won, but because she knew this moment was bigger than a win. This was about being seen. Her calm didn't come from ego. It came from exhaustion, from years of watching the world stack odds and blame her for not leaping them clean, from knowing justice was never built with her in mind and yet daring to confront it anyway. She wasn't a hero, she was a survivor. And in that courtroom on that day, she stopped surviving and started fighting back. Judge Walter Grayson sat in that big leather chair, the one he thought gave him authority, looking like a man who just realized he might need a lawyer. His hand, the same one that had banged down so many gavels like he was Moses with a sound system, now hovered midair, unsure whether to clutch the bench or his own chest. The courtroom protocol machine clicked away, dutifully recording each pause, each stammer, each foot shuffled under pressure, like this was just another Tuesday in Los Angeles. But no machine, no cold piece of government hardware could capture the speed with which this room's foundation was cracking. And at the center of that tremor, a woman in a plain white blouse, a folder full of receipts, and a truth nobody saw coming. Prosecutor Carrington, who just 30 minutes ago swaggered like a butcher at a meat counter, chest puffed, chin raised, now looked like a freshman caught lying on his college resume. He fumbled with his papers like they were rigged to explode, knocked a pen across the floor, and tripped on his own briefcase. A junior clerk tried to help him gather his notes, only to knock more to the floor. He stood half-bent, disheveled, red-faced, and mumbling through breath that had clearly turned against him. "Your Honor," Carrington stammered, voice cracking in ways no microphone could fix, "we'd like to request a technical recess. There's a need to verify the submitted materials." Grayson didn't respond immediately. Instead, he performed a ritual known only to old judges and frustrated teachers. He slowly removed his glasses, wiped them with the edge of a cloth that looked older than the courthouse itself, pulled a tiny bottle from his pocket, eye drops or maybe self-respect, and administered one deliberate blink at a time. And then finally he leaned back in that chair. "You've had, what, 10 years to verify these facts?" he said slowly. "Or am I confused and we're just now discovering deadlines?" Carrington froze. His mouth moved but no sounds followed, and the silence that hung between them, stretched wide and thin, made it painfully clear to everyone in the room. This wasn't just a misstep, it was exposure. Grayson's voice cut again. 20-minute recess. And Carrington? He looked over his glasses this time, not under them. "Bring me an explanation, not an excuse, not a theory, something rooted in reality. Because right now, Miss Johnson is doing her job, and she's doing it better." The courtroom reacted like a middle school when the principal finally called out the bully. A collective "oh" rippled through the benches. Someone even chuckled, but smothered it with a cough. And somewhere in the back, even the stenographer seemed to pause typing, just to let the moment breathe. Marissa didn't flinch. She sat back on that stiff wooden bench, the kind designed to punish posture, without leaning or shifting. She didn't relax. Relaxation was for people who were allowed to believe they might be heard. A bailiff approached her. White man, early 40s, gray creeping in at the temples. Not hostile, but exhausted. The kind of tired only years of watching broken systems run like clockwork could cause. "Miss," he started, low voice, respectful but curious, "where'd you learn all this? I mean, seriously, where did it come from?" Marissa gave him a look. Not cold, not defensive, just calculated. The kind of look a woman gives when deciding if her truth is worth spending on a stranger. "My mama," she finally said. "She was a paralegal. She wrote motions with me, sitting at the kitchen table, eating noodles while she filed complaints on recycled paper. Learned to read case transcripts before I read bedtime stories. He nodded, said nothing, and backed away. Some truths don't need follow-ups. Exactly 20 minutes later, the court reconvened. But this time, Carrington didn't walk in alone. He was followed by a tall man in a Navy suit, the kind of suit you don't wear unless you expect confrontation. He wasn't a defense attorney. He wasn't media. He wasn't even someone with a nameplate at the front. He was from internal affairs, and his presence said everything. Something in this courtroom had gone septic, and the department sent someone to clean it up. The man introduced himself with the bland formality of someone trained to be invisible. Your Honor, per request logged via the public grievance portal, initiated by Miss Johnson, the department has conducted a preliminary audit regarding Officer Rogers' conduct. Grayson furrowed his brow. I don't recall making any such request. The man nodded. No, sir, but Miss Johnson's inquiry triggered an automated review under community complaint protocol. The silence that followed was not awkward. It was dense. The kind of silence that makes you realize the room has shifted, that justice for once had gotten a whiff of truth and turned its head. Proceed, the judge said. The man cleared his throat and opened the folder. Over the past calendar year, Officer Rogers has been involved in 23 arrests where primary evidence either failed to exist, was declared inadmissible, or was attributed to cameras that were either malfunctioning or non-operational. The room stiffened. 19 of those arrests involved African-American individuals. 11 followed an identical pattern: pursuit without body cam footage, reported accidental injury, citations of resisting arrest, and 0 corroborating witnesses. That's when the room truly stopped breathing. Not metaphorically, actually. Old school silence, the kind your grandmother used to describe when a storm was coming and the birds stopped singing, the kind that lands in your lungs like cement, the kind that makes even the floorboards think twice about creaking. Judge Grayson rubbed his temples. Not in fatigue, in shame. Marissa sat straight, no grin, no gloating, because celebration in that moment would turn truth into theater, and truth deserved better. The judge looked at her, and for the first time in the entire proceeding, his voice held something it never had before: humility. Miss Johnson, he said quietly, do you understand what you've just done? She met his eyes. I defended my name, she said. The rest? That's on them. Carrington, what was left of him, rose unsteadily. We request the case be suspended pending full departmental review. Grayson nodded. Motion granted. All charges against Miss Johnson are dropped, effective immediately. And then something happened that wasn't in the protocol, wasn't in any court guide or bailiff manual. From the back row, a man in a wrinkled shirt stood slowly, holding up a sign that looked handmade. It read, My brother's one of them. He's still inside. He's innocent. Behind him a woman stood, mid-30s, tattoo on her wrist barely hidden under her sleeve. Nephew, Rogers' case. Ix Onisibignon. One by one, people began to rise. Not yelling, not chanting, just standing. Eyes steady, hands still, presence undeniable. No slogans, no hashtags, just bodies, there to be seen. After years of being erased, Grayson didn't interrupt. He just watched, and for the first time in his career, he saw a courtroom not as a place to control, but a place to listen. Marissa rose last. She didn't raise a sign. She didn't need one. Everyone already knew her name. Marissa stood outside the courthouse like a storm had passed, and she was the only one who walked out dry. Behind her, a crowd gathered, not with chants or megaphones, but with eyes, heavy eyes. Eyes that had seen too much and hoped for too little. Some held signs. Others just stood still, carrying names on their shirts, memories in their palms. This wasn't protest. It was remembrance. She didn't wave, didn't pose. She wasn't there to inspire a hashtag. She was breathing, standing. That was enough. But 5 floors above, in a corner office of the district attorney's wing, the temperature was rising. Assistant DA Carrington sat like someone had removed his spine. Across from him stood the district attorney herself, a woman so precise, so immaculately pressed, that even her disappointment sounded like a legal notice. You let one woman, no law degree, no political allies, no courtroom experience, tear apart our entire case, she said, each word landing like a gavel. Carrington mumbled, his voice weak, like his collar was tightening without hands. I didn't know she'd gain access to those records. You didn't know, she repeated, almost amused, because you didn't bother to check. Her assistant dropped a document in front of him, a printed copy of Marissa's GPS evidence request, time-stamped 28 days before trial. She either has the mind of a tactician, the DA muttered, or she let the thought hang. or I'm done, Carrington said softly. Correct, she replied. No hesitation, no pity. Meanwhile, across town in the precinct office, Officer Rogers sat like a man whose car, career, and credibility had just been towed all at once. The precinct captain sat across from him, papers spread between them like evidence at a wake. 23 arrests, the captain said slowly. Same structure, same gaps, same silence, no footage, no witnesses, and a pattern so ugly it practically screams from the page. Rogers shifted. I was following instructions. Instructions? That's what you're going with. Rogers looked down. The captain leaned in. You didn't just destroy your reputation. You burned ours. Every officer in this building just lost a piece of their dignity because you couldn't tell the truth from strategy. Rogers opened his mouth, then said the thing that made the captain nearly flip the desk. She's black. Who would have believed her without that flash drive? The silence after that wasn't empty. It was violent. The captain stood up, not to respond, but to leave. Because if he stayed, his badge wouldn't stop his hands. Back on the street, Marissa walked to a place she hadn't seen in years. The public library, the same one where she'd read forensic reports instead of novels, where she'd taught herself how to interpret transcripts instead of fairy tales. She held the same notebook from court in her arms. Its edges were worn, its cover bent, but its pages were full, not just with ink, but with purpose. A local reporter jogged up, breathless, microphone in hand. Miss Johnson, quick question. Are you planning to go to law school? Maybe open your own practice? Marissa stopped. Why? She asked plainly. To play by their rules? I'm not interested in reshuffling the same deck. So you're going into politics? She smirked. Politics is where people go to talk about change because they're too scared to cause it. I don't have time for meetings about meetings. I have work to do. And she walked away. Because microphones don't build justice. Movement does. Across the city, in the Department of Justice, Judge Grayson now sat where he never expected to be, in front of an oversight commission. The same halls he used to stride through with authority now echoed differently. Every sound, every cough was judgment. A senior investigator looked over her glasses. Judge Grayson, why did you allow a case built on false reports to proceed to trial? He hesitated like the truth had to be located first. I trusted the prosecution. That's standard in my courtroom. Another panelist jumped in. You ignored her filings, her motions, her documented complaints. This isn't negligence, Judge. This is complicity. And for once, Grayson didn't deflect, didn't object. He slouched, not like a tired man, but like one who finally realized the weight of his own choices. Downstairs in the security checkpoint lobby, an older black guard leaned toward a younger colleague. You know what's wild, he said. I've been letting these folks into this building 20 years, but I ain't never seen one of them judges stop the way she made him stop, not once. That night on local TV, a panel convened. A retired judge, a civil rights organizer, a business analyst in a crisp suit, and a cop, recently dismissed after a scandal that barely made headlines 2 years prior. The analyst adjusted his glasses like a man about to lecture. This sets a dangerous precedent, he began. If people start representing themselves, submitting evidence independently, the retired judge interrupted, sharp as a blade. Then maybe they'll start winning their cases. What a nightmare, he stammered. It's not that simple. We have structure, professionals. Professionals who let Rogers operate untouched for 2 years? The activist asked. That structure? He didn't answer. That evening, in a small apartment above a grocery store, Marissa sat with a chipped mug of tea, no sugar, too tired to walk to the corner store. On the table beside her was a printed form from months ago. Legal aid denied, not qualifying for free representation. Below it was a stack of notes, names, dates, inmate numbers, all of them black, all of them without advocates. She opened her old laptop. The screen flickered but held. She typed into the search bar, how to start a nonprofit legal initiative. On a fresh document, she typed, Marissa Johnson, for those they only hear at the time of arrest. Below that, she began her first case list. No slogans, no logo, no mission statement, just names. Because that's how real change begins. 3 weeks had passed, but for some folks, it felt like a lifetime had cracked open and spilled across the pavement. The courthouse, once a building Marissa couldn't approach without a tightness in her chest, now looked like just another slab of cement and tinted glass. Just another structure where hope sat in the lobby while power slipped through side doors. Except now on its wall, right beside the tarnished brass plaque of City Seal, hung a new sign. Review of 67 cases initiated under private citizen petition. And underneath, etched not for honor, but for accountability, were 5 words. Petition filed by Marissa Johnson. It wasn't a medal, wasn't a ceremony, but the world always knows when someone's walked through fire, because they carry the smoke in their stride. Her name was in the news, but not as some celebrated heroine. No, no, she was a threat now, a disruption, a splinter in the system's smooth, familiar routine. To the machine, she wasn't a voice. She was a loose screw, and that was just fine with her. She walked the city streets in old jeans and sneakers, worn more by time than by fashion. A simple backpack hung over one shoulder. No entourage, no podium, just a list. 27 names, 27 stories. People who'd been forgotten after the gavel dropped. Folks whose lawyers never called back. Mothers who still waited by the phone. Men who learned courtroom Latin the hard way, one charge at a time. And right outside City Hall, the mayor, yes, the same one who once smiled for cameras beside Officer Rogers while handing him a dedication to public service certificate, was now sweating in the sun like truth had found his front door. "Miss Johnson," he called out, his voice sticky, like overripe fruit in heat. "A word?" Marissa stopped, turned. "You get 1 word," she said, "and it better start with apology." He paused, like the word itself had never visited his mouth before. I'd like to propose a collaboration," he stammered. "We have resources, funding. We could amplify your efforts." "I'm not looking for a partner," she cut in. "I'm building my own structure." He blinked. "Excuse me? I'm not interested in fixing your house. I'm laying a new foundation, one without secret doors and soundproof rooms." "But," she raised her hand. "You've said but for long enough. It's time you learn no." She walked on, not for dramatic effect, not for the cameras, but because in her backpack was a manila folder stamped with legal registration papers, the beginning of her nonprofit initiative, Ink instead of chains. A place for those trapped in the system, not with silence but with tools. 1 week later, inside a small repurposed building, a former driving school with peeling paint and just enough space for 2 desks and a mini fridge, the first office of Ink instead of chains opened its doors. No ribbon cutting, no mayoral speech, just a metal sign above the entrance and a line of people that stretched past the mailbox. A teenage girl accused of shoplifting. A man profiled and stopped for fitting the description. An immigrant tried without a translator. A grandmother whose son was still behind bars on a Rogers constructed charge. They didn't want slogans. They needed help. Marissa sat behind a desk that still smelled like its old DMV past. "Tell me what happened," she said. They spoke, and she wrote. Not for money, not for likes, but because every name deserved to be written by someone who gave a damn. Meanwhile, Judge Grayson sat in his living room, now free from the weight of a robe he no longer had the right to wear. He'd resigned, not out of scandal, but because one day he looked in the mirror and couldn't recognize the man who stared back. On his kitchen table lay a handwritten note, no envelope, just paper, plain and true, Marissa's handwriting. "You didn't believe me at first, but you listened. That's a start. Change doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just moves forward. Thank you for not standing in the way." He read it twice. For the first time in a long while, he felt something deeper than guilt. He felt peace. 6 months later, at a community radio station tucked behind a laundromat and 2 beauty salons, Marissa stepped up to a microphone. No TV cameras, no media blitz, just a worn mic and a host with a warm voice and calloused hands. "Good morning, Miss Johnson," the host said. "The city's talking. Some folks say you're the new Rosa Parks." Marissa smiled softly. "I'm not trying to be a symbol," she said. "I just want to be the ink in the pen that helps somebody write their own freedom." "What would you say to people who are scared?" She paused. "Fear is real, but if it keeps your mouth shut, it's working for the wrong team." "And the last question," the host said, leaning in. "Are you angry?" Her voice dropped. I'm not angry." She looked up. "I remember, and that's worse. 1 year later, at a citywide forum on justice reform, Marissa stood in front of a crowd. She wore no badge, no title, just her name. She didn't give a speech, no slogans, no grandstanding. She read names, names of people her initiative had helped free, names of folks who'd been lost to courtrooms and cages. Each name was a stone in a new foundation. When she finished, the room stood. Judges, journalists, public defenders, mechanics, grandmothers, students, survivors. Not because they were told to, but because they needed to. And somewhere, in a quiet corner of the city, an old judge looked up from his morning paper and whispered, "When she walked into that courtroom, I rolled my eyes. When she spoke, the whole city stood."